Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Creating Online Calculators with Forio Epicenter. My name is Michael Bean, and today we're going to be talking about a few things regarding creating online calculators. We'll start by explaining more about what Epicenter is and how it works and what kinds of calculations you can do with Epicenter, and then go into building a simulation or a calculator using the tool by starting by creating a model, then building a basic interface, and finally showing how to create accounts. At the end of the webinar today, we'll have time for next steps and questions if anybody has any. On Forio Epicenter, there's a variety of ways to create different kinds of interactive calculators. A lot of things that we're doing are single-player games, there's multiplayer games, there's scenario-based simulations. It's been actually a little while since we've talked about how to do calculators, so I'm excited about today's webinar kind of covering that topic. To give you a little bit of a sense for what Epicenter does, it's a computational platform that can host server-side models, allow you to create interactive interfaces on those server-side models, and then share them online. And it's not just about creating calculators. You can also do simulations, you can do statistical analyses, optimizations, and other kinds of tools. The platform supports a variety of different languages. It includes some commercial simulation packages like what you see at the top here. It also includes things like Python, R, Julia, Java. Those are all kind of technical computing languages that can be used for creating models of various kinds. Probably the most popular tool, though, for creating models is Excel. And today, for example, because of that being so popular, we're going to use Excel for our example. But in addition to that, Epicenter can support libraries that work with these popular languages like Python and R and so forth. For example, Cplex, Gurobi, other tools are available that allow you to create optimizations using Python, for example. And I'll show you at least one or two examples of that during our webinar today. And to get started, what I'd like to do is just show you some completed examples of some calculators that were built using Epicenter. And to start us off with that, let's take a look at an article that appeared in Harvard Business Review. This is a little bit of a dated article now. It's about 8 years old, and it's talking about, do you know your cost of capital? And I think it's actually useful to see this from the perspective of what can happen with an article that's a bit dated, but have live data that's updating the calculator that kind of help keep that current. So here we have this article from Michael Jacobs and Anil Shivadasani, and they're writing about the way that you kind of think about your cost of capital over time. So, what it gets into is discussing things like, that the actual cost of capital that you calculate for your organization can vary based on your forecasting horizon, what your cost of debt is, what risk-free rate you use, and there's a variety of risk-free rates that are available and so forth. And so this article kind of goes through and talks about it. And of course, when they describe this, what they're describing it is data that came in from 2012. So a bit dated now regarding the risk-free rates and things like that. But with this article, within the platform, within Epicenter, there's this cost of capital tool. And you can see when it loaded just a moment ago, it said loading financial data. What it actually does is load current financial data, the cost of capital for current rates and things. And you can see that here. So here's today's 10-year treasury rate, 5-year treasury rate, and so forth. And what this allows you to do is kind of experiment with the assumptions that are built into, or the ideas that are built in the article, and try out what you think, what would happen with your own cost of capital based on this. And here we can see, we're crossing the line. That this is a net present value line. When we're above this line, it indicates that we have a positive NPV, and below it we have a negative NPV. And we can also experiment with different rates for cost of equity, and also different rates for beta and equity market premium and things like that. So there's assumptions that are going here that determine your weighted average cost of capital here at the bottom. And this is a tool for kind of thinking about how, in an example project, how your net present value might change over time. There are also some capabilities here internally where you can extend it, where you're able to kind of cut and paste data in to run your own cash flow analysis for your own organization. So, these calculators tend to be single page tools. Not all of them are single page tools, but this is sort of a good example of a single page calculator. But like I said, some calculators are a bit more elaborate. This is one that was developed with PowerSim, that's a commercial simulation package, to calculate how many Tesla Powerwalls you might need in order to provide electricity for your house. And it goes through a set of assumptions through, essentially 5 pages here to review what would go into creating a calculator for determining the number of Powerwalls that you would need in your house. Or essentially, these are batteries that you would put in your garage or maybe your basement that would store power from your solar panels that would be on your roof or somewhere, and then discharge that power in the evening when sunlight isn't available. So here, the starting point with this is to look at your own energy consumption per house, and we can change the number of people in your household, for example, here, and that's going to rescale the energy consumption. You can also do things like look at specifics of how you might use electricity. So here's how you use your refrigerator, here's your TV, and there's different power requirements for your TV over time. And here what we're doing is looking at the daily variation. So there's an assumption that's built into this regarding TV usage, which is that the TV comes on around 6 p.m. and is watched often until midnight. And then sometimes the television's watched a little bit in the morning before maybe going to work or something like that. So what you can do, though, if you think, hey, this isn't the way that I consume TV, it's maybe something different, you can kind of redraw that pattern over time. And then that's going to be your own hourly energy consumption for that will be more representative of what you do. And part of the purpose of these calculators often is to be able to provide that kind of custom analysis here over time. And then from there, after you've entered that, you can put in information around your household. Now, this particular calculator was built by a group in Norway, and so their default address here is in Norway. But what we can do here, if we want, is put in the address for Forio, which is at 2601 Mission Street. So I'll go ahead and do that. And if I zoom in here, you can see the top of our building, and maybe there could be some solar panels that could go up there. I don't know, something like that. But the big purpose of this is to determine the latitude. And this is often the case with these kinds of calculators, kind of like we saw a moment ago with the cost of capital simulation, where you can get data from online, live data, in the case of the cost of capital simulation, where it's loading the current rates for treasury rates and LIBOR rates and things like that for today. It's very helpful. But here what we're doing is we're using Google data to determine the latitude, which determines the amount of direct sunlight that you could get at a particular position over time. And that can sort of feed in without asking the end user to calculate their latitude here. So and then in addition, we can look at now the number of Powerwall units and kind of see what's happening here. So for this particular latitude that I'm at, which is where I am today, we can see when the sun rises and when the sun sets over time, and the highest potential energy occurring around 1 p.m. And what you can see here is there's a bit of a problem where the Powerwall energy is dropping off and kind of fully consumed by 10 p.m. And that's a bit early. So what we maybe look at here is expanding the number of Powerwall units to a greater number. And by doing that, we sort of get more coverage, and it sort of indicates that we're going to, end up with a better situation with respect to, them being fully charged. This is kind of nearing the peak of this. We could even do more if we wanted to, but this is at least is ending up with a better result regarding Powerwall usage over time. And then from there, we can look at benefits per day, and for the least sunny days and the most sunny days, and sort of what the pattern might look like, sort of experimenting with it further. And then looking at consumption, what happens over time based on seasonality, and then finally get this net present value of looking at how long is it going to take for this investment in these Powerwalls to pay off over time. So another style of calculator, and you can see the more, in some sense, more complex than the first one. It has more steps to it, but doing a more complex calculation over time. Another type of calculator is an investment portfolio tool, and here we can look at the investment over time and sort of different scenarios using Monte Carlo analysis. So let's go ahead and start this one up. And this one is kind of built as a calculator and kind of built as a game. And it's really, the intent of it is to understand basics of modern portfolio theory, which is that you should look for portfolios that are negatively correlated. Here we can see the outcome of 1,000 runs of Monte Carlo simulation, and it's sort of suggesting something here regarding what a goal is. So this turns it into a bit more of a, extending it beyond just a traditional calculator into more of a tool that can help us plan for the future. And what we can see here is the average value for the portfolio of 9%. And chance of loss of 1%. That's a very low chance of loss, so that's really good, but not a very good return on that portfolio over 5 years. And you can sort of see why down here in terms of how that portfolio is created, where 92% of the portfolio is in cash, and the rest of it, a small amount of it, only 8% of it is in other instruments or other investments. So what we can do with this is experiment with taking, moving that out of cash and into other things. Here, if I get rid of my cash investments and kind of distribute it evenly among the other things in our portfolio, we get a nicer distribution, which is good. However, we also have a much higher chance of loss. So that may be an unacceptably high chance of loss. And the goal with the tool here is to slide values around and see if we can find ways of reducing our chance of loss here. And a good way to do that is to look at this historical data on the side here, and you can see that global bonds and emerging markets are the most negatively correlated investments in our portfolio. So we might try to maximize those two and make the other ones a bit smaller. And if I do that, let's see if I can find a place here to get this. So that's pretty good. Okay, so this is not a bad outcome here, where we have, a fairly tight curve around 20% return with an average return of 32% over 5 years, and sort of a long tail on the right side, meaning there's some chances of a higher return, but very little below 100, which in fact obviously only 4% below 100 here. So this may be the sort of outcome that I'm looking for. And the idea here is that we can run, in this case, 1,000 Monte Carlo runs fairly quickly as we kind of slide these things along and see it update over time. Another type of calculator, this one having some time-based components to it. A fourth type of calculator is this one. It's a nurse scheduling tool, and it actually uses an optimization algorithm along with Python for building it. So, some of the other ones are kind of simpler tools. This one was using PowerSim as a commercial simulation package. This one was using Excel. This one is using, but this one is using Python. And the idea here is to think about scheduling nurses in a hospital. And you can see the average time that nurses are working, and there's sort of a fairness rhetoric that's in here. And what we're looking for is how we're going to schedule people between emergency department, cardiac care, and oncology. And the basic idea of the tool is that we have a lot of nurses in this hospital, and we can individually schedule nurses to see how they're working and things like that. So here we see Cecilia, who has a couple days off. She has Wednesdays and Fridays off. We can determine who Cecilia likes to work with and also who's incompatible. And before I get to that, let me just take a look at what schedule was generated from this optimization as a starting point. So let's just take a look at what it put together for us. Okay, so here we go. So here we see Debbie and Joyce working together in emergency, kind of a long shift. They're working from 8 to 12 and then from 12 to 6. So I guess it's a 10-hour shift between the two of them on in emergency on Mondays. And you see cardiac care is closed on Mondays, and then oncology is closed on Tuesdays, et cetera. So, one of the things we might look at is, well, what if we introduce some other limitations in terms of how people work together in here? And let's look at Debbie and Joyce. So let's go to Debbie here. And there's Debbie. And there's, she has the Wednesdays and Saturdays off. She may have people that she likes to work with, and she may also have people that she prefers not to work with. So let's imagine that Debbie would prefer not to work with Joyce in here, and we're going to go ahead and save that as a nurse constraint here and rerun the optimization. And there it's a rerun, and we can look at our new schedule now, and we can see, well, actually, interestingly, we put the constraint on Debbie, but Joyce stays put. However, Debbie is no longer scheduled an emergency with Joyce on Mondays. And in fact, let's see when Debbie is working again here. Debbie is working in emergency on Tuesdays from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. And also in cardiac care. Oh, that's a long day for her too. So in cardiac care from noon to 6. So she goes cardiac care from noon to 6, and then she sets a 14-hour day for Debbie on Tuesdays. And there's other ways of constraining that as well if we want to. So one of the things that goes in here is other constraints that we can put in, and also the priority of those constraints that exist within the tool. But this tool is a bit more sophisticated, again, running a more complicated calculation with this optimizer under the scene here. In this case, what we're doing is we're running Python with a Cplex solver under the hood for the optimization. And for my final example, just to show something a bit different, there's kind of a classic optimization problem called the traveling salesman problem. It comes from the, I think, 1950s or 1940s or something like that. And the idea behind it is to find the optimum route for people that are, for reducing the amount of time that it takes across different points. And this one starts with some arbitrary businesses. This is pulling from an API about businesses within San Francisco. And then what we could do is we can use that data. Let me just refresh this. We can use that data to calculate the best route based on that, and it kind of analyzes a bunch of different possible routes. And then what it does is it identifies the optimum route, which reduces the amount of time that it's going to take to get to all these different locations and things here. And what's sort of interesting about this regarding route optimization, I mean, this is a classic OR problem, operations research problem, but historically the way it's been solved is by looking at distance. This one, because we're using Google Maps in this case, we're actually able to analyze it with time instead of with distance. And so we're sort of optimizing based on travel time. And if you run this right now here in San Francisco at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, we get a certain route. That route might be different if there's a traffic jam later on, or if we're doing it, maybe at 5 p.m. or something like that. It can vary a bit based on the timing, that sort of thing. So those are some examples of different types of calculators can be built, and you can see there's quite a range of sophistication of them. Not all of these have to be this complex. You can do very simple things for building optimizations, and I want to show you a little bit about how that works as well. So here we have an example of someone. This may be like you as you're building a simulation here or a calculator. Where you're working by yourself. Maybe you don't have a team that's with you, but you want to put something online to create a calculator. And our tool, Forio Epicenter, can work to build this kind of calculator. But in other cases, you might have a team of people who are coming together that are building a more sophisticated calculator that's maybe going to be resold, or maybe you're using it to generate leads for your organization. And that might consist of a UI designer, someone who's building a model in Excel or something else, a web developer, and someone who's testing in QA and so forth. So there could be a range of people who are collaborating together to build this style of simulation. And again, the platform can support both of these kinds of users, or so the lone calculator developer here working by themselves building something, or a team of people who are building what we think of as high production value calculators, of which I would count, I think, the examples that I shared just a moment ago as all being high production value, kind of highly polished calculators. But to support both of these users, what Forio provides, what Epicenter provides, is a stack of technologies in order to get this all to work. So what we have at the top of the stack is something called interface templates, and those are used for creating online interfaces, and that can be used by individual developers or individual modelers to, who don't have a background in, say, design or development. And if you do want to dive in deeper, I suppose, or if you have some skills in doing UI development on the web, you can use tools like Flow.js or Epicenter.js. These are libraries that are available to do more sophisticated development, and these are the kinds of libraries that would typically be used by web developers. And you can start at the stack, you can stay at any level of the stack that you want to, that you're comfortable with. As you go up the stack, things become easier to build, and as you go down the stack, things become more flexible. And for today, what we're going to do for our example is stay at the top of the stack, because that's the easiest to use, but it also is something that I think can be done very quickly, because we want to be able to put together some examples, in a short period of time for our webinar today. So let's jump into that and kind of take a look at an existing model. And what I did for today is I was looking around for a model that we could use for our example, and I found this calculator online, which I downloaded, and it's for something called Amazon FBA, which, let's see, what does FBA stand for? Fulfillment by Amazon. That's what FBA stands for, Fulfillment by Amazon. And the idea is, if you're a reseller, say you have a small business and you're trying to sell something that you bought on, you bought from somewhere and you're distributing it through Amazon, this helps you determine, should you use Amazon for fulfillment or should you do it yourself? That's the basic idea of it. So this is a simple calculator that someone put together online, and you can see there's some production costs and things like that that are associated with it, and listing prices and things. And then what it does is it kind of calculates your units to break even in terms of the costs that are associated with the thing that you're selling, and where you're just going to start to make money. So here, we have 1,000 units and we need to sell 301 units in order to break even. So what we want to do with this is provide this calculator online. And what I want to do to kind of get started with this is I want to be able to create sort of a little graph of the break even over time. So that's my goals. I want to be able to show units to break even, not just as a point, but also kind of show how it might change, what the angle of that approach is over time, and see if the angle changes at all or something like that. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to build a little extension down over here on a new page, and we'll see, what we want to do here. So I think in order to put this together, what we want to do is show something about units sold. We want to show what our revenue is. We want to show what our total fixed costs are, and total variable costs per unit, and then profit, and finally, well, I guess that would be it for now. So, what we want to do is kind of show a range, and what you can see back on this page is, we have up to the ability to sell up to 1,000 units, and our break even is around 300. So what I'm going to do is, on my sheet here for calculating this, I'm going to start off at 50 units and then just kind of go up by 50 at a time. So I'm going to say, let's just imagine that we're selling, I don't know, up to 500 units or so, something like that over time. So here we can see the units sold from 50 to 500 units. And then what I want to be able to do is calculate the revenue that I would get for each of those units. And the way I would do that is I would say equal the units sold times the price. And the price here is this number. And I just need to freeze it so it doesn't move as I go across here. Okay, so there's the revenue that I would receive for selling 50 units. And up here's the amount that I would receive for selling 500 units. So there's the revenue increasing over time. Then I also need to look at what my total fixed costs are, not over time, pardon me, over units sold. Next, I want to see what my total fixed costs are, and that's just going to be a single number. And if I look here, my total fixed costs are, it looks like 4,900 per for all 1,000 units. And again, I want to freeze that in place by using those anchor things in Excel, if you're familiar with that. And so there's our fixed costs over time, and our variable costs are going to be, again, equal to what our units sold are times the total variable costs per unit here. So that's going to be equal to this 571 on the break-even calculator on this side. So let me go ahead and click on that. And again, what I need to do is make it so that 571 doesn't change as I drag this across And here we can see the fixed cost change, or the variable cost changing over time. And so to calculate my profit, what I need to do is say it's going to be equal to my revenue minus my fixed costs plus my variable costs. And here you can see at 50 units, we only sold 50 units, we'd lose a lot of money. And if we sold 500 units, we'd make a lot of money. And right at 300 or so, we start to break even. In fact, we know the answer already. It's 301 for this. So I'm going to use this for sort of creating a diagram that kind of shows how that's changing over time. That's what I want to do to kind of extend what the original modeler who built this is doing with this, right? So let's go ahead and save this. And what we need to do in order to load this calculator into Epicenter is use named ranges. And we don't necessarily have to use named ranges, but it just makes it a lot easier to pull the data in to make this all work. So, and it's pretty easy to do with this. What you do is just select cells like this. And what I can do now is go to Insert, Name, Create. This is in Excel. It's, excuse me, in Mac, on the Mac on Excel. I'm using a Mac, a Mac right now, a MacBook. But if you're using a PC, there's a similar sort of procedure. You can look it up how to do named ranges on this. We go name create, and then it's going to use the left column. And what that does is it names the cells to the left. Like, so if I go over here and I click on this one, you can see this cell is now named total units. You can see that up here in the upper left. And this cell here is named shipping costs per kilogram. It also does some things where it strips out sort of characters that are not usually used for creating names. Like, for example, this one has pound kilogram 1000, and you can see it's changed it to kilogram _1 _ 1000. And what it's basically done is it's changed it's removed the pound, it's removed the spaces and used underscores instead, and replaced the comma also with an underscore. So that's just something that's going to be readable for that. So there are some shifts that it does for the naming, sort of that naming convention that exists here. Let's do the same with the middle column here. I'm going to do Insert, Name, Create, and use the left column for this. And then finally, we'll do it over here. Insert, Name, Create, and we'll use the left column here. So now all of these are named. We can see the units to break even as a calculation, and so forth. And I can go over here too for the page I just created here, and I want to name these as well because I want to use this data, this sort of series data, to create a graph in my online calculator. And I'll go to Insert, Name, Create, and left column here. And now for this one, what you'll see is this row is now named units sold. So it's now not just a single cell, but it's the entire row that's named this. And the most important one here for this in terms of my calculator is this row is called profit. So that whole series of numbers is called profit here, and I can use that in my calculator. And that's really all I need to do. So I'm going to go here and save this now, save my file. You can see it's called model already. And my next step here is to get it into Epicenter. So let's start that by opening up a new tab, and I'll go to forio.com/epicenter. And when I go in that, I'm logged into my account already, and I'm going to go find a place where I want to work for today. I'm going to use this account that I use for examples sometimes. I'm going to go to create a new project. And so I'm on a new project page, and I want to name this. I'm going to call this my Amazon FBA Calculator. And what you can see is adding that in creates a URL or a URL-friendly naming convention here. So it changes Amazon FBA Calculator to Amazon-FBA-Calculator, kind of changing the spaces and taking out the uppercase in here for that. So, but if I want to edit that, I can edit it here if I want. And I can also choose what kind of access I want to provide. Do I want to make this just public, where anyone in the world can access my calculator? Do I want to set it up where only I have access to it? That would be private. Or do I want to require people to be authenticated? And if you're doing this as a way of generating, a lot of people who build calculators are using it as a way of generating leads. So what they're really doing with it is trying to gather email addresses and other information about the users. The authenticated approach can be a good way to do that. So I'm going to use that today, and I will show you a little bit about how to use it for lead generation. But it can also be used to provide the calculator on a subscription basis where you sell it, or you can just make it public and make it available to anyone for free if you want. So let me go ahead and create the project. And so now we have the Amazon FBA Calculator project started here, and there's a URL that's available for it. If I click on that URL, of course, there's nothing in it. We see the robot. It's just saying the project page you are trying to view is not available. And the reason for that, of course, is that we have nothing in it. We have no model and we have no interface. And the idea behind Epicenter is that you need to provide the logic for the simulation or the calculator that you're building in the model, and this is in a model folder. And then you need to create the interface using this in this interface folder. And the interface folder starts off with some folders, but below those folders, there's no information available. So the first step usually, especially if we're going to use this template tool, is to start by uploading the model. And so, we've completed our model here with our named ranges. And now what we need to do is to find it. And here's the model that we just saved a moment ago. And I'm going to go back here and drag this into my, my folder. And now my model has been uploaded. So now the model's here. And I could start at this point by designing an interface with HTML and using those Epicenter and Flow.js libraries. But an easier way to do it if we're doing something quick, or if we don't have the skills to do that, is to use this interface builder tool that's available. And so if I click on interface builder, what it does is it looks at the model that has been uploaded, and it tries to guess at what kind of simulation or calculator or whatever is going to be built with this. And for what I uploaded here, it's giving me quite a range of things that could be built with the simple spreadsheet that I uploaded. It could say, hey, you could be trying to build a turn-by-turn based game or a single-player time-based simulation. That could be what you're trying to do. Maybe this, I think, would be challenging with what we have here, but you could try to build a multiplayer simulation. You could also do something, run comparisons, where we can compare one scenario to another. But for today, what we really want to do is this last one, which is to build a calculator. So we're interested in building a calculator here. And I'm going to go ahead and select this as my option for today. And when I select the calculator, what it does is it produces sort of a set of pages that make sense for building a calculator. And because calculators are generally pretty simple, it's only producing 2 pages here. It has an introductory page where it kind of explains what the calculator does, and then it has a decisions page for where the calculator is going to sit. And you can modify that further. You can add additional pages if you want to. Here's some example pages for different kinds of things that could go in here. But generally calculators are meant to be fairly simple. Some of them can be multiple pages, as we saw in some of the examples. But for today, we're just going to stick with this example where we have just a couple of things here. And a good place to start here is maybe just naming the project and to put a title in here that's going to be representative, so that when people are going between these pages here, they see what they're working on. And the way to do that is click on the header and footer settings here. So let me click on header footer settings. I'm going to change the project title, and I'll call this Fulfillment by Amazon Calculator. And that's going to put a header on there. In fact, if I go to this now, you can see that's kind of filled in. And I might also want to put, say, a little picture in there, or header or logo to appear with it. And right now there's nothing available, but if I upload an image, I can add an image to that calculator. So let me go ahead and click on that and find an image. Earlier, before we started our webinar today, I found this image that I thought would be appropriate for this little Amazon calculator we're talking about. And here you can see my image, and let me just resize this. And I'm going to hit OK on that. And now I can select it. And if I go back to my intro now, you can see here's the image that I put in, fulfillment. So it's starting to look a little better already. And I could add some text here. I could say, welcome to the FBA Calculator. I also, here we could put some text explaining it. And I just, just in order to save time today, I got some text ready for this, so I don't have to type it all out. But here's some text that would potentially go in here. And maybe even some media. You could put an image in here. You can put a video, for example, and there's a nice video from, I think, Amazon, where it explains how fulfillment works. So here's a little Fulfillment by Amazon video that explains what's going on. And then there's buttons that are optional. We don't have to have buttons in here, but we can. And for this one, I'm going to say, okay, get started, and we start using the calculator. I could change the name of this to use the calculator. And what I want to do then is add an operation to it. So I want to say what we want to do. And for this one, all we want to do is just navigate to the calculator itself. So we want to use the UI to navigate to the right page. In this case, we want to navigate to a decisions page. So now that's lit up, meaning that it's going to work. And if I click on it, it's going to take me to that page. I don't really like the name decisions here for this. I think this is really not decisions, more of the calculator itself. So, you know, one of the nice items we have in terms of flexibility with this is to rename things if we want to. And if I click on navigation settings, I can change the label here. And I'm just going to change this to calculator. So now I do that. And if I go back to my intro, you can see now this is named calculator. And if I click over here, it's going to take me to this calculator page. And it's kind of set up something that's going to work for me. And here you can see, again, you know, the idea with the UI designer tool is going to be flexible for creating different styles of interfaces, and it's making some suggestions about how to build it. And, you know, for today, I think I probably want to put a couple items in here. I want to, like I said earlier, I want to add this break-even analysis. So I'm going to put that in somewhere, and I maybe want to have another graph. Here it's offering to let me do text, and I do have a graph here that I can create, but I just to illustrate how this works, you can actually change these elements if you don't like what they are, and you can even add additional elements to it. So like here, for example, it says click to add text, but what if I want to instead put a graph here? If I click on this, and then you scroll down, you can see it says choose a different component type. I'll click on that, and then below that, you can see different chart types that are available. So I'm going to go ahead and click on charts here, and for this one, I think I'll do a line chart. I think that should work. You know, this is where I want to put in my break-even analysis. So I'm going to call this break-even analysis here. And you know, from my model earlier, what I want to do is add some variables to kind of show what I want to do. So here's the model that I put together, and the main thing I want to plot with this is profit over time. And so here's my profit data that comes from the model that's going to change as I change assumptions in here. And it's named profit, as you can see here. So what I want to do then is select the variable here and look for profit. And there's the profit variable, and we call this model introspection. It provides this ability to look inside, in this case, the Excel model, and pull out variables that we want to be able to plot over time. So let me go ahead and add that. And here we can see the plot of this break-even analysis over time for profit, or over periods, actually. It's not over time in this case, it's just over the number of elements. I guess we have 10 elements total here. And it sort of matches up, right? So at 0, it's 4086, which is this value. And at the height, it's 3240, which is out here. So 3241 if you round up, right? Okay, so that's what that is. But this is actually not meaningful, because what we really want on the x-axis here is not just the count of the array elements, but instead we want to use the units sold, and that's what's going to be that plot over time here. So what we want to add to this then is to change the x-axis and to tie it to a specific variable in our model. And that variable here, we're going to look up here as units sold. And here now we can see the units sold over time. And, you know, out here somewhere we can see, you know, where it flips to the new value. Now, I also don't like this short format for this, because I really want to see that this is meant to be dollars here. So what I want to also do with this is change some of the assumptions regarding the y-axis here. I want to change maybe the format to look like this. Let's see here, I didn't do that quite right. And you kind of followed this convention here of using pound for things that are open, and then this. So now this is a formatting for this, which looks, I think, a little bit better for kind of understanding the break-even analysis over time. You know, there are other data that are available here too, where, you know, so here somewhere I'm breaking even, but it doesn't show it exactly. I might want to add some text to show where I break even here somewhere, and I can add it in here, and the way I can do that is by, you know, looking back at my sheet and seeing the number of units to break even. And here you can see this particular cell that gives me the exact number of units to break even is called units to break even. So I can use that text here. I'm just going to copy that out of here and go back here and say, you will break even break even, I guess it's one word. If you sell, and then I can do these double brackets, squiggly brackets to open it, and then paste in the variable that I have in here, and then close it, and close it again, units, period. Okay, so now it gives me, you will break even if you sell 300.95, blah, blah. That's kind of a lot of precision, and it's really not what I'm looking for here, to have that level of precision. I think that's too much for the end user to read. And so I can fix that by doing something where if I use a vertical bar, and I can use the same formatting that I used for formatting the y-axis here. So I'll do pound, comma, pound, pound, 0, and that's going to reformat that. You can see that reformatted here. Now it says it's rounded off to these units, and so this is giving me my break-even analysis over on this side. And I have this ability now to add other charts if I want to. But the key part to a calculator, of course, is to be able to enter assumptions from the Excel, from the model, and change them and show how the break-even changes over time. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a thing here where we'll say, enter your assumptions below here. Let's see here. Let's do that here. Enter your assumptions below. And then we can put in different assumption types for building this out. And let's take a look at our spreadsheet again here to kind of figure out what we might include here. What we might do is put in items listing fees, referral fees. Let's just build out a bit of this to get to net profit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the item listing price as my starting point. And I'm going to choose a text input for that. I'm going to call this list price of item. And then I'm going to choose my variable here, which is going to be item listing price. There it is. And now it's formatted this way, but I probably want to change the format to be, in currency here. So $21.99 for my price. And then below that, let's see, next would be referral. Let's put total fulfillment as the next line item here. Actually, what we see, and the idea that the person who built this spreadsheet is that the things in orange are meant to be input. So let's do fulfillment fees in here too. Then let's add fulfillment fees next. And I'll do that as a text input again. And I'll do fulfillment fees, and I think it was called. It's just fulfillment fees. Okay, good. So let's do that. Fulfillment fees. There's the variable, and again, I'm going to format it as dollars here. Oh wait, sorry, that was the wrong one. But format it like this so I see the cents as well as the dollars. And then we want to show total fulfillment. And let's do that. So we'll do total fulfillment here. And notice there are other options here for input. Sometimes we'd want the input to not be an input, but to be sort of a calculated value, and we can use output for that. And that's a very common feature in calculators. So let's do an output here. And in this case, we want to put in total fulfillment, and the variable I think is also total fulfillment. There we go, there's the variable. And again, we want to format it according to currency, and so this is calculating out here. And then finally, just to move this along, we'll do net profit. So that'll be our last bit here. In a real calculator, we'd add a lot more into this, but I just want to get to the point of completing this so we can take a look at it together and kind of go from there. So we have our net profit variable, and I think it's called net profit. There it is, and we'll format it this way. And there's our calculator kind of put together. So that's probably enough to get started here. Let me go ahead and save this. And let's go back now to our project homepage. And what you'll see now in the interface folder, as we've kind of gone through that, is it's built up other pages that are available. So if I go to the pages folder now, for example, you can see decisions and introduction that are here. We have settings here for how our model's set up. We have authenticated. You need to log into it. Let's just go ahead and give it a try and try running it locally here to see how this all works. So here's our Fulfillment by Amazon calculator. And we can see here if we can play this little video to see what happens with that.
How to use Fulfillment by Amazon.
Okay, so there's our little introduction with the video available, and now we can click on Use the Calculator, which takes us to the calculator page. And you can see our different fulfillment fees and net profit and things like that. And if I go in here and say change the price to $25, you can see it recalculates over here on the right and also recalculates the net profit here. Let's try another number just to make that more obvious. Let's try $23 here. You can see these numbers kind of changing as going through. Now, I think what would be nice here would be to have a line that is drawn at the 0 point, and unfortunately we don't have that in here, but that's something that we can easily add. So just maybe as a final step here for building out our calculator, let's add a 0 point line in here, or 0 line. And the way we're going to do that is go back here and add in our spreadsheet something, we'll just call it 0 line. And this is a little bit of a hack, but it works just fine. We put this in here, we just put a bunch of zeros in over time, or over our units sold, and that will create the 0 line for us. And then what I want to do is, like I did before, is name this. Go to Insert, Name, Create, and use the left column. And now what you can see here is that this is named 0 line. And I'm going to go ahead and save this again. And then I'll go back to my spreadsheet, or excuse me, back to Epicenter, and go to my model and re-upload that model with the change I just made. There we go. We're going to go ahead and replace it. So now the model's updated. You can see it has the current time associated with that model. And now I want to go back to the interface builder and edit the calculator to use the variable that I just added. So here's my break-even analysis. I can see the data variable for profit, but I want to add a new variable, and what it is the 0 line that I have. And so now that shows the 0 line in here. And actually, you know, another thing that would be kind of handy to have in here is you can see the formatting for the mouse over. It would be nice to have that be formatted a little better. Let's see here. So we have the tooltips number format here. We want to have that formatted with currency as well, I think. Well, actually, you know what would be better is to use the, yeah, let's just use currency. That's fine. Okay, there we go. So that's enough, I think, for this right now. And if we, you know, can try this one again, if we go back here and go to our, you know, I saved it, go back to the project homepage and go to Run Project. And now it's there. I can go to the, you know, the calculator, and you know, if I refresh here, I can see the final line and things like that for running that out. But actually, before I get to that, the other thing I need to do here is to build in the some groups for actually running this out. Here's here, so they're available, and I'm just going to create user 1. Let's say, let me think of a good name here. FBA user 1. And go ahead, oops, I messed that up. Let me try that again. Oh, dang it. Let's try that one more time. FBA user 1. Okay, and I'll call this my name here. Put my name in, and we'll create this new user. And hopefully it was long enough. It is. Okay, good. And now if I go to run this project, let me do it this way. Run this project in an incognito window so you can kind of see what it looks like in a clear window here. I can put in my username and password and log in, and now I have, you know, access to the simulator that I built a moment ago. Let's see here. So I can go ahead and go through and click the calculator, see the break-even line that I created, and sort of the output over time, and do things like change the assumptions. All right, so that's kind of what I wanted to show you today, a little bit about building a calculator. And you know, I also want to point you to some hints just in terms of building this out over time. And I think the big one that sort of emerges from this is you should name ranges in your Excel spreadsheet to reference them easily in your interface. So, you know, the thing that I did in this, just as a reminder, is, you know, as I went through it, I named these ranges using the technique for the MacBook technique, or Macintosh version of Excel technique of going to insert, name, create. And it's slightly different for Windows, but you get the basic idea. And not only did I do it for this page that I did here, but also, you know, for all of these here, as you probably recall. And then this one got named total units, for example, and fixed costs. And that just makes it easier to refer to with that model introspection that I showed a moment ago. If you are interested in learning more, We have other resources available for this. There's a support forum that's very active. There's also an online reference guide, and there's other webinars on other topics of other styles of simulations that are available as well. Just to give you a little bit of a sense for how to access that support forum, if you go to Epicenter up here and you click on the top, you can see documentation and support. You click on support, and it's going to take you to the support forum and show you sort of discussions that are going on with people kind of talking about different things that are happening. And there's also the documentation here that goes through and looks at, you know, different approaches for building your model with Excel, Julia, PowerSim, some of the things that I showed today, Python, and so forth. So that's the basics of it. All right, I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time today. And this webinar will be posted online, and we'll be sure to send you access to this webinar after it's been posted online, so that you can share it with your colleagues if you choose to. And if you have any questions after this, feel free to send us an email at info@forio.com. Thanks again for your time. Bye-bye, everyone.